I was following Amit, the Srijan Foundation activist, as he went into their home to learn about what happened to their daughter. And that was the first time I met the family. So it was very, very sensitive, obviously. And you know, at the time, I didn't know what was going to happen with the story. I didn't know, you know, I didn't know whether the case was actually, whether they would actually follow through with the case. There's no clarity around that. So it was a very slow and kind of gradual process, and the trust came after several months, really, Sara. Like it wasn't instant. And I remember at one point thinking to myself, like looking at the rushes, thinking, I don't know if this is really going to work, you know, because it felt like they were still just slightly uncomfortable, slightly guarded. I hadn't quite sort of broken through, and so I wasn't sure how far I was going to be able to take this. And then there was just one particular moment where I just knew, like they, you know, that whatever that experience is, we've all felt it as filmmakers, you know, just that moment where that sort of separation between you and the participant in your film, it just becomes one of such great kind of intimacy, and they let their guards down and they're just who they are. And I remember very specifically the moment that it happened, and it was such a turning point, you know, for the film, and then also, of course, in terms of our relationship, right? My relationship with the family, so. Yeah.
Can you share what that moment was, if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, so you know the scene in the film by the fire when they're talking about, you know, it's after the first day of court, and Ranjit says to Jaganti, you know, oh, they said that they were innocent, and we went to court today, and she's saying, oh, this is such a pain in the ass, and you know, like, of course we're going to fight for our daughter, and they ask her, like, what do you think of, you know, the fact that we're fighting for you? It was that evening, yeah, it was just. It's like, they're just themselves, you know. They were so comfortable with the camera and the crew, and it just felt very, very powerful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's so beautiful to hear, and that makes sense to me because, yeah, you just so feel the trust coursing throughout the entire film. There's no other way to capture and to showcase films at that kind of, you know, that show that level of delicacy. I'm just going to ask one more before I open it up, and this is perhaps a very big question, but I'm curious how the idea of justice kind of changed for you through the process of making this film, and especially this, you made it was an 8-year-long process, and the complexity that is illustrated in the film is quite profound. So I'm sure you have a very nuanced take on this, and I'm just curious if you could share a little bit about some of the major takeaways about justice as you made the film.
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's always, for me, I think I've been in many screenings where when the verdict is announced, people break into applause, right? People start clapping. And I remember the first time it happened, I felt really shocked by it. I felt really shocked by that response. And I could understand it, you know, just as from the perspective of a film, right? Because you know, it's building, and the story is building, and it's so intense, and they've gone through so much, and then finally, it's a David and Goliath story, right? And then finally, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel, kind of thing. So of course the audience responds that way, and yet, you know, for me, I think what I felt so profoundly was a sadness. Just a sadness that this even happened, of course, and then just a sadness at the wastage of life, you know, the kind of loss, like everyone loses, right? It didn't feel like a victory to me in one particular way, although it is, of course, in one particular way, and so I think for me it's for a couple of things. I mean, one, I've spent so much time in India. And after you spend that much time in India, you realize just how complicated that country is, and you know, you also understand that those boys and those men are just products of this culture. They're, you know, and that's not to be an apologist for their behavior, but it is to, you know, you realize the importance of understanding a larger context and just moving with compassion when you start talking about justice and start talking about change. So I think, it's been a very long, gradual process that I've come to these sorts of conclusions, and living and spending all this time in India has certainly, had an impact on me both as a human being and as a filmmaker. So.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that complexity just comes through so powerfully. Does anyone in the audience have some questions? Yes, you were right there in the denim jacket.
Hi. I just wanted to commend you on the time and care that you took with this film. I heard you interviewed on NPR, which is what brought me here today, and it's wonderful to see it get recognition by the New York Times and the Oscar contention that Sara mentioned. But I'm wondering about the distribution in India.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
It feels like a film that needs to be
Yeah.
there most of all.
Yeah.
I have family in Assam, and I plan to
Right.
share this with them. But,
Yeah.
could you
Yeah.
say a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that we're doing with the film is we're doing a big impact campaign, and we're working with the organization Equality Now. There's a couple of lots of different things that we're going to be doing in terms of impact, and we're sort of developing an overall strategy with Equality Now. But definitely for me, I've done impact campaigns in India before, and with this particular film, it's so important, that it's seen in India and it's kind of disseminated as widely as possible, and that it's also really used as a tool to make change. Not just in terms of encouraging other survivors to come forward, which is obviously so important, especially if we're going to tackle this idea of honor and shame, right? I mean, sexual violence is seen, and it's not just in India, but globally, right? It's the woman's fault, or it's the victim's, somehow the victim is to blame. So to encourage survivors to come forward. But for me, most importantly, I think what the film can do is have an impact on masculinity. And I think what Ranjit does is he, as the NGO says, right? I mean, he really is an example of what is possible in around the world, but specifically, in India. So in terms of distribution, right now there isn't, there isn't distribution. There's no. We don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of people that we're speaking with. But let's see where it goes. If I do a theatrical release of the film, which is something that I would like to do in India, simply because it gives it a certain kind of visibility. There's obviously the matter of a censor certificate, and going through that legal process. So, which is something that's actually in the works. So, yeah.
How about you, right there at the
Yeah, hi, that's amazing film. Congratulations. It's, heartbreakingly beautiful. I wanted to ask, you mentioned the issue of trust, and there was that moment when it became both of your story, rather than just you being the person following the story. So, but in terms of filming, then did you go back and film? Were there reenactments? Did you go back and say the previous things that seemed a little bit stiff? Did you do that?
Yeah, no. The only thing that we did was, the scene at the beginning where she's braiding her hair. So that obviously was done later, and her interview. So her master interview was done after the case was over. And that was a very deliberate choice for me. It's kind of like what we were talking about with your sister, right? And for me, I've never filmed with a survivor before, and I've never, especially a child survivor, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't do anything that was going to traumatize her, or you know what I mean? It was so it was a very deliberate choice not to film with her as little as possible as the case was going on, and then to do her master interview, at the end, and then some of the scenes that we needed with her, like to flesh out her story, to do it afterwards. Yeah. But I know that there are a couple of people feel that some of the scenes with the NGO feel a little bit stiff, and they're actually not. It's just yeah.
Actually the reverse. I meant they're so natural.
Oh yes,
So
yeah,
beautifully filmed
yeah,
that
yeah,
it feels like, oh my God.
yeah,
Like if you have the presence of
yeah,
mind to film it so beautifully, why?
yeah. That's my husband. He's so good. He's really good. He just sort of has this ability to kind of, disappear into the background and not draw attention to himself. He's he's 6'2", but he's just so quiet. And my sound recordist, Anita, there's the three of us, and we've worked together for so many years. I know, Sara, you'd mentioned that as well. You could feel it, right? We've worked together for so many years, and if I may say this, I mean, all three of us are also Vipassana meditators. So I think that also, I think, helps. We're all kind of on the same sort of frequency. We all sort of, vibrate at the same frequency. So it's very easy for us to go into a situation and be just there, present, without drawing, too much attention. And I think after a while, people started to feel extremely comfortable. And it's also a function of filming for a long period of time, right? Like if we were just filming for 2 or 3 months, we may not have gotten this kind of intimacy. But because we filmed for such a long period of time, and also we would just go sometimes with, just like that, we would just go to spend time with the family, and all of that really helped. So, yeah.
It's such a good question, and it is. I just want to echo how beautifully it's felt. There's such extraordinary reaction shots, like to just see people's faces and to get access to the complexity that comes over one's face, and they're hearing such intense news. It's so skillfully done, and such a testament to your collaborative work and to your leadership. I saw a hand, yes, you in the teal sweater.
With people in North America, write to Netflix. Write to Netflix. Tell them you want this film out in the world. I mean, yeah, literally. That's and it will happen. Of course, it will happen. But that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for it to get out and to be seen, because it feels like it has a lot of work to do. There's a tremendous potential for the film to have impact, and so it's just a matter of time. But really, one of the things that you can do is, and my social media person made me promise I was going to do this, but it's essentially like just follow us on our social media handles, To Kill a Tiger Doc. And just spread the word about the film, right? That's the greatest gift that you can give to us right now is telling people about the film. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna echo that, because it makes such a difference in the life of a film for people to tell people, and especially a film like that's this powerful and needs to be seen far and wide. So just, yes, everyone, please do that. Okay, we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and how about you there?
Was that something that you could feel growing as you kept filming this?
Yeah. That was a really interesting eruption. That moment actually. So yes, we definitely felt tension throughout, and it would, it went in waves. It would just sort of dissipate, but and there was always an intention to sort of try to get the villagers to also open up to us and not to feel like we were taking sides or sitting in judgment of them. Really, that was really important for us, to try to build a relationship, both because that's what we believe, and also because we wanted to not create more friction for the family, not create more trouble for the family. But we were definitely aware that there was tension, and I think as time went on, and as it became clear that the family wasn't going to drop the charges, it started to become more and more intense. And, interestingly, when that moment happened, like when it actually, when it erupted, it was so curious. The feeling that I had, of course, I was afraid. I was afraid for my crew. I was afraid for the family. I was afraid for myself, for the driver. The thing that I felt more than anything else, though, was shame. I felt shame. I felt like I had, in spite of all of my good intentions, in spite of wanting to do something positive, I still went into a world and I had an impact. And if you know India, if you understand Indian society and you understand those villages, they're these very complex, intricate ecosystems, and they're systems of survival, And I felt in a way that I had ruptured something, which needed to be ruptured. It needed to be affected, but I felt that I was very aware of the cost of change and how complicated and how difficult it is, So I felt very bad about my role in that. So yeah.
I was so in awe in how you handled that. When you hear, you behind the camera when they say, "What are you doing here?" and you just say very calmly, with such strength, there are very few fathers that stick behind their daughters, and that it's so simple and powerful. So yeah, we just have to applaud you for how you handled yourself under such an intense moment. So I think we have time for one more question, and then I selfishly want to just ask you one thing at the end too. So I see a hand at the back. Yeah.
Hi.
First off, thank you so much. It's a very powerful film. I really appreciated every second. I was curious about her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
How was their response to everything that was going on? Because the victim blaming,
What an amazing question.
the entire process must have been really difficult on them, and especially
Yeah.
being so young.
Mm-hmm. That's such a nobody's asked me that question. What a brilliant question, actually. Thank you for asking that question. I think the boys may have, they were younger, so I think it was a little bit more difficult. It's a bit more difficult for them to kind of comprehend what was going on. I think for her sister, obviously it was complicated, and she really felt it. I never talked to her, again, because I'm not a therapist, and I don't want to get into stuff that I don't know at the risk of kind of harming someone. But just in terms of what I observed, it was very clear to me that it was very difficult for her. One of the things that but the family, they didn't hide it from the kids, right? And that's the other thing in the villages. Nobody hides anything. It's all out in the open, right? It's all discussed. It's all talked about. You saw the scene where she's rehearsing her testimony and her little brother is there. And obviously he's taking it all in. But nobody, they don't hide anything. They don't hide anything there. One of the things that Ranjit said to me was that part of the reason he was doing what he was doing is because he had another daughter, and he wanted to make sure that this fate didn't befall his other daughter. So, yeah.
There's that shot at the end where she is braiding her little sister's hair, and to see the generational power and what that shot indicated, that I thought that was particularly so beautiful and moving. So the selfish question that I'm going to ask, but it's so you can all know, is I would love to just hear you talk about the impact that seeing the film has had on the people in the film themselves, not just the family, but also the ward member.
Yeah. So a few months ago, I went to India to kind of do stress test screenings of the film, because we're going to be doing this impact work, and I want to make sure that things are okay in the village. And it doesn't have a detrimental impact on the family. So I showed the film to a number of people that were in the film, including the ward member, and I was so terrified. I was so scared to show it to him, you know. And after, and I was actually sitting with like a bunch of activists, and they were saying, "Are you really sure you want to show them the film?" I said, "Yes, we've got to do this." And afterwards, after he saw the film, he said that he was ashamed of himself. And he felt so moved by what the family, like the struggles of the family and what they did. And he said that he felt that the whole community needed to see the film, that the village needed to see the film, and they needed to understand what they put the family through. It was amazing. And then, you know, afterwards what I did is I took the ward member, because I was meeting Ranjit later that day, and I took the ward member to Ranjit, and I said, "Tell him what you told me," you know? So it was very, very powerful. Yeah, it's very powerful.
That really is. That's so healing. Well, everybody, please join me in giving Nisha another round of applause. And are there any final words you'd like to say? Okay. And please follow To Kill a Tiger Doc.